as a teacher when we come for the refresher course. So naturally, um, human rights and social development, the appropriate theme for this particular refresher course, cannot exclude an important act, that is Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act. This particular act was passed in the year 2016 by our great parliament. And this particular act is actually significant for more than one reason. Its rationale, relevance, its adequacy and efficacy naturally capture the imagination of all teachers. Again, the discourse or the discussion on Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act appears to be the reverberation of the previous class. But in order to avoid the repetition, I want to concentrate your attention. I want to draw your attention only on the few aspects of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016. 2016. The learned professors of law might be knowing the inside and outside of the RPD Act, for the simple reason that it is known for its novelty and nobility. I want to confess one thing, that it is highly impossible to focus on all the 102 sections which are writ large in 17 chapters. Instead of that, I want to draw your attention to a few important things. That is a slight introduction and subsequently a slight focus on what to call rights and entitlements, education, and some other provisions which are most relevant for the purpose of our understanding the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act. Perhaps India must have passed more than 5,000 legislations so far. Just I said only 5,000. It might be more in number. India is the largest democracy. Largest democracy because it has got large number of voters as well. And democracy is such a form of government wherein people of different denominants, different dimensions belonging to different areas naturally participate in its affairs. The entire citizenry is actually a depository of the sovereignty of the state. The authority of the state is derived from the sovereignty of the people. And the Constitution, considered as the supreme law of the land, has everything to command. And our democracy has flowered and is being flourished thanks to the magnificent Constitution. Our Constitution is sufficiently big and lengthy. sufficiently large enough to cover all the vivisections of the Indian society. Quite often, architect of the Indian Constitution, B.R. Ambedkar, went to the extent of depicting or narrating the Constitution of India with all his nobility and high degree of intellectuality, that its success largely depends upon not the words it has, but its success largely depends upon the people who work it out. The fiber and tissues of the Indian Constitution, if you look at, have much to do for the benefit of the people. But rights of persons with disabilities enacted by our Indian Parliament is not a new act. It is an expanded version of the Persons with Disabilities Act 1995, and also it is in a way the brainchild of, it is a child of two important, one legislation and one international convention. 1995 Persons with Disabilities Act and United Nations Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities, to which India is also a signatory, have literally given birth to the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act. So, in a way, it's a blend of these two. So why such a blend has taken place? What is the background? These questions naturally arise in our mind. They demand sufficient answers from all of us. India is the second largest population in the world. It's the second largest population status has given it. Hello, are you hearing me? Hearing me?
Yes,
No, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thanks to its democratic system, it has given birth to so many legislations. And persons with disabilities are also part of the Indian democracy. In India, or for that matter, in any other democratic country, normals are not alone the masters of democracy. Even persons with disabilities, equipped with the right to vote, are also masters of democracy. They are also the contributing factors for the success and failures of the democracy. So that is the reason why whenever we say that we have a democracy, what kind of democracy it is a question that calls an answer. Dear sirs and madams, you are aware of the fact that even in the context of Indian democracy, we do find that elitists play a predominant role. But they say that they are working for the benefit of the entire population. Rhetoric and reality are always different. The Constitution, framed by our architects and all the members of the Constituent Assembly, appears to be the best embodiment. When put into action, it has been successfully given mellowed fruits for so many people. But still, the Constitution is subject to intense debate. The beauty of democracy not simply lies in what you call the mere propaganda. The beauty of democracy lies in debate. That is the reason why it is called a deliberative democracy. Whether this deliberative democracy can be inclusive without the participation of the persons with disabilities? Certainly not. Its humanness, its inclusiveness, its civility, its comprehensiveness, its magnanimity, its leadership's ability and nobility, its constitution's grand vision have much to do even with the persons with disabilities. But those who study the Constitution will be convinced of the fact that there is no original Constitution did not have much about persons with disabilities except Article 41, I suppose. But we, the people of India, that is the beginning phrase, beginning sentence of the preamble of the Indian Constitution. We, the people of India, does not mean simply the people who are able-bodied. Even persons with disabilities are also part of this, we, the people of India. Our India cannot be visualized in the absence of the disabled population. So naturally, disability democracy, development, discourses cannot be insulated from the needs and rationalities of the persons with disabilities who too constitute the inevitable part of the Indian society, economy, polity, culture, etc., etc. Anyhow, why this particular act was passed? What is the background? Was there no attempt on part of the governments, even the colonial government, way back in 1912, had made certain provisions for addressing the issues of the mental health of the people residing in this country. Similarly, in post-constitutional era, we have passed several important acts. National Mental Health Act, Rehabilitation Council of India Act, Persons with Disabilities Act 1995, National Trust Act for the welfare of the people, including cerebral palsy and multiple disabilities Act 1999. And we have formulated a policy, national policy in 2006 and also in 2012. Since India is accommodating around more than 2 crore persons with disabilities as per the National Sample Survey 2002, and even in 2016, there is a document called Disability Statistics. It becomes crystal clear that even in India also, you do find people belonging to the various castes and religions. The only true section of the Indian society which can boast of secularism is none other than the disability section. It's the only secular section because you do find people with disabilities in all castes, ethnicity, religions, and also regions. So naturally, it is a universal section. So demographically speaking, before 2001, persons with disabilities were not part of the census. Politics of enumeration did not accommodate persons with disabilities. Why was it? Was it an apathy on part of the state? Might be true. For your information, state makes and also unmakes many things. Similarly, we had one important activist by name Javed Abidi. He raised an important question in the year 1998 to the central government. What is the population? What is the population with disabilities in India? How do you frame programs? How do you formulate policies and programs? How do you prepare your schemes and implement the schemes for the persons with disabilities in India without proper knowledge of their numerical data? So number is more important than anything else. The number itself is the lowest common factor in democracy. Number of beneficiaries is essential in order to determine and also shape the nature of policies and programs. So when this question was raised, the union government did not have an answer. So in 2001, an attempt was made to incorporate a column regarding the data for persons with disabilities. In 2011 also, census was carried out. And even in that report also, we do find that we have got good number of persons with disabilities who can refer to them in the census reports and also in 2016 statistical data, statistical data pertaining to disability. Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act passed in 2016. Why? Because in 1995, whatever the Persons with Disabilities Act was passed, that fell too short. And in 2006 United Nations Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities, that was accepted by the United Nations General Assembly and subsequently put to ratification by so many countries. India is one among the 164 signatories, 162 or 64 signatories to this CRPD Act. Naturally, it is the bounden duty of India to harmonize its Persons with Disabilities Act with the provisions of the UNCRPD. Because UNCRPD is much more comprehensive than that of the Persons with Disabilities Act. Meanwhile, Bivako Millennium and so many rounds of attempts were made for strengthening the disability related legislations. International pressure was also exerted. And especially disability movement reached its zenith, especially at the fag end of the 20th century and in the beginning of the 21st century. The voice of the challenged people is being heard loudly. In 2008, there was a one president of the World Bank, Wolfenson, he went to the extent of alerting the world leaders in an inaugural speech. He said that he met around 100 leaders from 120 countries. For none of them, the accessibility, education, employment, and equity pertaining to persons with disabilities was a priority. That means even in development conferences, summits, and other things at the international level, disability-related issues were not the part of the agenda for most of the leaders in the world. It clearly indicates, even in the age of democracy, development, and globalization, disability issues could not figure in the developmental agendas. That was the reason why disability movement inside India and outside India has been and is always alert in pushing its agenda for legislations. As part of this particular exercise, even in India also, great organizations like National Federation of the Blind, All India Confederation for the Blind, and physically challenged related organizations, they began to exert pressure, and political parties, including Indian National Congress, Bharatiya Janata Party, and other political parties, began to give space for their demands in their election manifestos. And challenged persons also began to attract the attention of the political leaders and political parties, and they began to articulate their demands. They began to aggregate their interests rather forcefully. And the World Bank's report stating that in each and every country, nearly 8 to 12% of the population might be disabled. That report has also alarmed the people in India. Whatever the statistics born out of the census is doubted to be dubious for many reasons. The first reason is that most of the people hesitated to give information regarding the birth and presence of the persons with children with disabilities in their family, because people are not ready to accept persons with disabilities. Why they are not ready to accept? Because they think that persons with disabilities are inferior to the normals. That sense of inferiority complex or inferiority even haunts in the minds of the parents of the disabled children. Even I know there was an MP, he has two blind persons, children, but unfortunately, still they are lagging behind because their father did not give them proper education. To reveal the identity and presence of the disabled children is thought to be a stigma even in Indian society. Against this background, and against the background of the United Nations Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the disability activists thought it would be wise on their part to seek the harmonization of that Persons with Disabilities Act with the UNCRPD would do justice. In consequence, when the pressure went on exerted, in 2016, on 27 December 2016, President gave his approval, and law schools had prepared, especially NALSAR and other organizations, other this thing were actively involved, and RPD Act was passed in 2016. This act is called shortly Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016. What I want to draw your attention to is some important provisions and how these provisions have been edified on some important principles. Dear sirs and madams, in my previous class, previous session, I was discussing with you some conceptual approaches to disability. At the fag end of that particular session, I drew your attention to the human rights model. That human rights model has been broadened, deepened, and stretched thanks to the United Nations Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And its principles. What are its principles? Some important principles naturally that gravitate our attention. Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act. Respect for inherent dignity of the individual. Respect for individual inherent dignity, autonomy, freedom to make choice, and independence of the person is the first most important principle of that convention, is also a foundation for this particular act. Very interesting it is. Respect for inherent dignity, equality, freedom of freedom of an individual to make choices, and also to uphold the right of an individual's independence of the person. So this is the first important principle. Equality and non-discrimination is equally important. Equality and non-discrimination. It is also an important principle. And full and effective participation and inclusion of the individual in society. Full and inclusive participation of persons with disabilities in society. It is also an important principle. And similarly, respect for difference. Respect for difference is equally important, and acceptance of the persons with disabilities as a part of the human diversity and humanity. Very, very important. Respect for the difference and acceptance of the persons with disabilities as part of the human diversity and humanity. And here you should understand that human variation is an inevitable part of the entire biodiversity. In addition to this, accessibility is equally important. Accessibility is nothing but the golden pavement. If the road is clear, movement is possible. If the road is not clear, wheels cannot ply properly. If you want to ply your car, road must be nice. If the road is decorated with so many humps, zebras, crosses and curves, ups and downs, your journey will not be a journey, but it will be a last journey. So that is the reason why accessibility must be considered as an important principle And in that regard, UNCRPD's this particular principle is also useful to this. And the equality of men and women explained in terms of the gender justice has also found its important place in this. Most importantly, children with disabilities also have the right to preserve their identity. So all these things are the crucial principles of the RPD Act, which it has borrowed from United Nations Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities. What is more fascinating is the chapter number 2 is most important for us. Here, equality and discrimination, that chapter is called Rights and Entitlements. Why this chapter is called Rights and Entitlements? Because it clearly highlights that persons with disabilities are entitled to these rights. We are entitled to right to equality. What kind of equality? After reading so many pages of literature on human rights of the persons with disabilities as explained in United Nations Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities, Persons with Disabilities Act, uh, American Disability Act, and Ontario Convention of the Canadian disability related laws, we do come to the conclusion that the nature of equality required for persons with disabilities appears to be totally different. You cannot deprive a person with disability a right to equality simply on grounds of disability. You may ask one question. Can persons with disabilities be equal to the able-bodied? When I was studying in PUC first year, after I completed my PUC first year, I had a habit. I had a diary, small diary. I took it to my teacher, one teacher. I don't want to tell his name because it has to be kept secret for the simple reason that he wrote only one sentence. Neevu navagabahude. Those who know Kannada are very well able to understand the import of this question. Those who are able to understand Kannada are able to understand the implication of this particular question, interrogatory sentence. Neevu navagabahude. Are you hearing me?
Yes,
Hello?
sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Can you become what we are? Can you become what we are? The question kept on haunting me like a specter. Even to this date, it haunts me. Even to this date, it bothers me. Even to this date, it inspires me. And even to this hour, it ignites me. It ignites me to dream, to bridge the gap between what you are and what we are. So, to become you, I have to jump several heights, several feet of height. Mere jumping is not enough. The conquest of space may not be the solution. Conquest of mind is most essential. Conquest of mind, not by words, not even by words, but by love and kindness. There lies the pith and substance of the human rights. So equality is not just a matter of words. It lies in the matter of acceptability. So wherever there is a discrimination, it dehumanizes. So equality and non-discrimination are crucial components of the rights and entitlements that figures in the second chapter of the RPD Act. Discrimination is actually non-discrimination. Discrimination is defined in a novel way in this UNCRPD as well as RPD Act. Any deprivation, denial, restriction, and distinction is called discrimination. Whatever an individual person with disability is due should be given in accordance with the set norms and procedures. Simply on grounds of disability should not deny. He or she should not be denied offered equal opportunity, should not be denied her personal liberty, and he should not be denied an access, should not be denied the status that an individual desires and deserves. That is non-discrimination. Again, discrimination and non-discrimination are born out of our vision. If our vision or if our mind is fully perverted, naturally we hug ourselves to the grand notion of discrimination. Discrimination is actually the mother of all evils and devils. But that discrimination has to be driven out of this mind first. I do experience that kind of discrimination in day-to-day business of the life, ranging from where I am to the society. So that the deprivation of the personal liberty, all these things should be avoided to the best possible extent. Besides, that equality we demand is not simply the equality that is there in the legal provisions, legal equality, social equality, and equality explained in terms of the politics. Besides all the parameters of the equality, material equality is equally important. What is this material equality? A child in the school gets books and pens. A child in the school gets printed books and good pens. Similarly, a child in the disability school, similarly a child in the child with a disability should also get the same materials, not same material, but the material which is required for its use. That means need-based equality is an essential thing here. If I get what is necessary for me, I will be able to make progress. So that's the reason why that equality and discrimination, non-discrimination constitute the basic pillars of the rights and entitlements. Besides rights and equality and non-discrimination, you do find that the children and women with disabilities also have their own peculiar rights, and their rights should also be guaranteed because they are also within the parameter of the equality and freedom. Their freedom is also equally important. The freedom enjoyed by a normal woman is totally different from the freedom enjoyed by a disabled woman. Quite often, normal women do not understand the pains and problems of the disabled women, because I observe it with my sensory organs. I observe it with my mind. how the persons with disabilities are in general and disabled women are treated in society. So women and children especially, are unable to understand, unable to adjust themselves in this world. Except mother, nobody will be able to understand and accept a disabled child. The other day, a friend of mine called from one particular college, and he started complaining about a disabled colleague in the institution. I said, you should have the capacity to accept the disability of the person like a mother. Then only you will be able to understand and respond to the pricks and problems of that particular disabled woman. Because disabled women have their own problems. That is the reason why, as a remedy, Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act guarantees that they should be given certain important provisions in accordance with their needs. Fine. Besides children and women with disabilities, right to community life is also guaranteed. Whether to live in home or to live in community is left to the discretion of the individual. The community participation is crucial component here. Community should be disabled friendly. It should be able to respond to the beats and pulses of the persons with disabilities. So right to live in community cannot be deprived of, because we are talking about the mainstreaming. Community-based rehabilitation is always laid emphasis, because parents or siblings or a family as an institution, grassroots institution, is not in a position to cater to all the burgeoning needs and demands of the persons with disabilities for their overall development. So their development largely depends upon the resources that may likely to be mobilized from the community itself. So community participation is crucial here. So right to community life is laid emphasis. Protection from cruelty, inhuman and degraded treatment is also most important. Of course, in comparison with the normals, in the age of survival of the fittest, the vulnerability of the persons with disabilities is more. So protection from cruelty, inhuman treatment, and degraded treatment should also be guaranteed to these people. So that is the reason why RPD Act has realized it. I should be recollecting one incident. In 2004, a blind girl by name Charu was raped in the bus in Delhi transport. Jyoti Nirbhaya Singh's case became so much prominent and profound in Indian society simply because she belonged to aristocratic family. But Charu's case did not cut the eyes of anybody. Only when it was telecast in the TV, then it became a hot issue, not as lengthy time as it is in the case of the Nirbhaya Singh's case. Now Arnab's arrest has become an issue. You might be, if you tune yourselves to the Republic TV, you will be able to understand how Arnab Goswami has been arrested today by the Maharashtra government. And much hullabaloo may likely to be made about it. But in the case of the persons with disabilities of this kind, there is no proper protection for against cruel and inhuman and degraded treatment. They were scot-free. No investigation was carried out properly, but simply it was a big fight debate during those times. Anyhow, protection from abuse, violence, and exploitation is equally important here, because it is an extension of both provisions or both rights. Somewhat they are similar. Chief Executive Magistrate of the district has an important role here. Whenever an incident of this kind comes to anybody's notice, immediately, whether the person who is already victimized or the person about whom the information is there, either the victim or the anybody can file a complaint, and Chief Executive Magistrate has to inquire into it. And all the safety measures have to be given to that person with disabilities. Even district committees are also formed, may have to be formed in order to give effect to this particular provision. So protection and safety are crucial component of the rights of the persons with disabilities in rights and entitlements, because they are closely associated with the liberty of life of an individual person with disabilities. Equal protection, everyone has a right to protection of law, and everyone is equal before the law. That DICE's two edicts, DICE's two principles of the rule of law are equally applicable for persons with disabilities here. Dear sirs and madams, one more provision. ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಯಾರಿಗೂ ಡೌಟ್ಸೇ ಬರ್ತಿಲ್ವಾ? Don't you have any doubt?
ಸರ್ ಇಂಟರಾಕ್ಷನ್ ಸೆಷನ್ ಬೇರೆ ಅಲ್ವಾ, ಅದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸುಮ್ಮನೆ ಇರ್ತಾರೆ ಸರ್ ಕೇಳ್ಕೊಂಡು.
ಓಕೆ, ಏನಾದ್ರೂ ಇದ್ರೆ ಕೇಳಬಹುದು ನೀವು ಮಧ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ. ಅದರ್ವೈಸ್ ಇಟ್ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿಕಮ್ ಎ ಬೋರಿಂಗ್.
ಇಲ್ಲ ಸರ್, ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿದೆ ಸರ್, ಇಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಲೈವ್ಲಿ ಆಗಿದೆ, ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿದೆ ಸರ್.
ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿದೆ ಸರ್.
ಯಾಕೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಾನು ಸೋಲೋಲೋಕಿ ಆಗ್ಬಾರ್ದು, ಯಾವಾಗ್ಲೂ ಮೊನೋಲಾಗ್ ಆಗ್ಬಾರ್ದು.
We are listening, we are enjoying the class, sir. We don't want to disturb you in the middle. That's why we keep quiet.
Because I turn my face here and there, and I am not able to visually contact with your eyes.
Sir, everything is coming for your mind, sir. That is, we should appreciate.
Thank
We
you.
people see the paper and
Answer your heart, sir.
not like you.
Sir, whatever you want to tell, that is communicated to us, sir. Communicated. It's okay, sir.
Okay. Our Yaro Shekarappa left, it seems, because of the network. Okay. So protection and safety are most important here, because at the time of the disaster, you should be able to understand, nobody will be able to understand who is put to what kind of hardships. National Disaster Management Authority, State Disaster Management Authority, District Disaster Management Authority, all should have the proper data about the location and nature of the persons with disabilities. That's a mandatory. In order to ensure that safety, this kind of information is indispensably necessary, and every administration should have that information. First of all, it is very difficult to get the information about the normal people. First of all, it is very difficult to get the information about the culprits, the society. And how do you get the information about the persons with disabilities? People think that they are the waste bodies. The unfortunate perception is very much deep. The callous attitude should be driven out. That callous attitude has to be changed. So that is the reason why disability itself is regarded as a disaster under some circumstances. Even in armed conflict also, in some other disasters, they have to be saved because their life is equally important. This aside, the most important right is also there. That is, women have right to productive rights, reproductive rights. So to ensure that reproductive rights, they should be given the maximum freedom and opportunity by the state. Because whenever an individual has a right equally diametric to it, the state has an obligation. So that state's obligation is to fulfill these rights. It has to create necessary conditions for that purpose. Then, dear sirs and madams, section 11 is very much important for our purpose. Accessibility in voting. That is the reason why I began my discourse on Rights of Persons with Disabilities Acts from Democracy. Still, we don't know how many persons with disabilities are the voters in the country. Accessibility in voting is most important. Almost all of you are aware of the fact that section Article 26 of the Indian Constitution has given every individual, that means who has attained the age of 18, is entitled to right to vote. But how to vote? How to vote is an important issue. Why to vote is also an important issue. To whom to vote is also an important issue. What is the basic need here? The basic need is the information. And the basic need is the accessibility. If you construct or if you have your polling stations above the Mount Everest, how can a person with the mobility challenged condition or a person with locomotor disability can climb up that mountain and vote? If you install your polling station somewhere far away in geographically inhospitable conditions, that is the reason why Oliver Michael, in his Disability as a New Social Movement, Disability Movement as a New Social Movement, in that book, he questions the wisdom of the state. Wherever there is a democracy and wherever there is a right to vote, has it allowed persons with disabilities to have an access to the polling stations in the geographically inhospitable conditions? Polling stations above the hills, polling stations deep into the forest, polling stations down the valleys, polling stations far away from towns and villages are naturally inaccessible. So accessibility has to be ensured, transportation has to be provided, information in the form of the relevant modes and communications should be given to the individuals. That is the reason why whenever I went to the polling station, first I asked, kindly give me information in Braille literature so that I will be able to know the candidates contesting the election, so that I will be able to know which candidate belongs to which political party. Even on the election voting machine, EVM, dots are, with the help of the dots, they write the information in the printed form. But that itself is sometimes not in a good shape. And sometimes we don't get the sufficient amount of literature because state has got its own economic incapacity, but still it cannot be compromised. So the Election Commission has to do all the necessary arrangements in order to ensure accessibility, either to enable the individual to go to the polling station, to enroll his name, to go to the polling station, to vote, and to vote according to his conscience and her conscience. Safety is most important. Safety is most important because democracy is not only a form of government, not only a philosophy, but also a way of life. That way of life should be such that in which even challenged persons should also be the inclusive members of that system. So likewise, accessibility to justice is equally important. Our police stations and courts should create all necessary infrastructure and give us all necessary information and maintain all kinds of the relevant records pertaining to the cases and complaints of the persons with disabilities. One important provision, section 13, that is legal capacity. Perhaps it appears to be the innovation in the UNCRPD and also in the RPD Act. Provision for legal capacity is a crucial component. It is the responsibility of the state to empower an individual to improve his legal capacity. What is legal capacity? Capacity to understand the ins and outs of laws, causes, process, and consequences of the laws. Capacity to understand the repercussions and implications of his decisions, reasons for the application of that particular law, what would be the impact of that particular provision for his life. All these are the part of the legal capacities. As a chairman, my duty was to see to that classes go smoothly. If the classes do not go smoothly, I have every right to investigate into it and come out with a remedy. If the remedy is found not to be a solution to the problem, then naturally I may have to approach higher authorities for necessary action. If the colleagues or the faculties or if the staff do not behave in accordance with the established norms of the administration, then quite naturally I have to exercise my legal capacity to bring them to the right behavior. Stick and carrot diplomacy has to be used sometimes. People may say, what this blind fellow can do, what kind of administration he can give, why we should listen to him. Such kind of a cheap mentality is observed not only in some circumstances. Even we should understand that there are good number of IAS people who are visually challenged and physically challenged. Sad to the Darwinian attitude, the dominant attitude of the able-bodied normal people, people capable of delivering, giving good administration and delivering good service among the challenged are unable to get the chance or opportunity. For example, in our own state, by name one Kempannaya, he actually had succeeded in passing KS. He was the first person to pass the KS in Karnataka. In the history of Karnataka's administrative history, he is the first person. But unfortunately, state government did not have the magnanimity to recognize his merit and give justice to him. It clearly indicates that sometimes state government itself institutionalizes discrimination, dehumanization, etc., to the detriment of the capacity of the individuals. So legal capacity demands that individual person with disability should have the enough capacity to question the arrogance and erratic attitude of the administration and the other systems. So you have right to do so. In addition to this, guardianship is an important thing. Persons with disabilities with high support needs, for example, intellectually challenged, are unable to take decisions on their own. There are different forms of the mental retardation. Mild mental retardation, moderate mental retardation, severe mental retardation, extreme mental retardation, and first one is simply mental retardation. Among these five, ranging from severe and extreme mental retardation, they cannot take decisions on their own. There is a concept called supportive decision making in UNCRPD. Supportive decision making. The similar kind of supportive decision making has been invoked even on this particular aspect. So that is the reason why guardianship, minors have to be given what you call the guardianship. Somebody must be the guardians to look after the persons with disabilities who are always treated as a minors. Although they are aged in terms of their age and other things, they should be looked after by someone. But even in their property and financial matters, there should not be a conflict of interest on part of the caregivers. Whether the caregivers or the family members, friends or others, they should not have a conflict of interest. Whenever there is a conflict of interest, the person with disability or his guardian should be given an important say in deciding the decisions the way they want, in deciding the guardians whom they want. So this is an important provision. And designation of authority to support is important right, and that right is equally most important right, because some authorities must be designated in order to render the needed support for the persons with high support disabilities. So in addition to this education, since we are all the teachers, we should know something about the education also. Section 16 of the RPD Act clearly obligates all the state governments and union governments and all authorities of the government some duties to perform some duties, and these duties are mentioned in that particular act. Among them, most important are, you have to give admission to the children, and you have to give admission not only in the primary schools but also in higher education also. 5% reservation is fixed here. Whether that 5% reservation is sufficient or not, that has to be seen subsequently. And educational status, besides giving admission, accessibility has to be given. Accessibility means the buildings in the school should be accessible, and transportation facility should be given, and all the material required for instruction material should also be given to the individual. Writer's help wherever there is necessity should be given, and instruction material should be given in the forms and formats required by the concerned disabled, and there is a exemption in the languages, and education in the sign language should also be given. Like this, there are so many things. Scholarship facility is also there. We should understand that at the time of writing the examination, you have to give the person a support of the scribe. Scribe should be given to the individual who wants to write, and extra time provision should also be made. I think most of the college teachers and principals do not understand the actual provisions and facilities given to the persons with disabilities, because still I receive complaints from different corners, from different persons with disabilities. And especially at the time of examination, I do come to know that they are harassed by the college teachers and principals, for not because of their lack of knowledge, but because of their lack of empathy. They do not understand. And examination manual quite often should consist of all this information. But we should respect that, but individualization must be made very strict. It's my kind request for all the teachers and teacher participants here, supervision should be strict. You should ensure that the candidate dictates and writer writes. Writer should not write what the candidate does not dictate. So that kind of strictness is essential. Supervision is essential in order to ensure quality education even among the persons with disabilities. For your information, sighted have the more habit of copying from the fellow students who write the examination. For example, like this they see, like this is they see. But in the case of the visually challenged persons, there is no chance to look at the fellow writers, fellow students' notes and answer booklets. So that way, acquisition of the merit requires a tremendous labor on part of the disabled person rather than the normal person. So there is a scope for inclusive education also. Inclusive education means section 17 is very much clear on this. Inclusive education means in primary schools, high schools and other things, even in new education policy, it is very much emphatic that inclusive education is necessary. What is inclusive education? Inclusive education is nothing but persons with disabilities, children with disabilities also study in normal schools, in neighborhood schools. They should not be denied admission. So school teachers and administration should be properly equipped with all the necessary skills and materials to teach the different categories of persons with disabilities. You should be more practical. This is called plus curriculum. So teachers must be good enough in plus curriculum. If you know Braille, you will be able to do more justice. If you know the sign language, you will be able to teach speech and hearing impaired. If you understand the problems of the mentally retarded persons, then you will be able to tame them nicely and train them nicely and educate them neatly. If you understand the problems of the mobility challenged person, you will be able to shift your class from first floor or second floor to the ground floor. If you understand the real problems of the challenge in terms of the sanitary matters, you will have accessible toilets and other things. So inclusive education and duties of the educational institutions require all teachers, principals, and entire educational administration to be very much vibrant and responsive and responsible to the needs and demands of the persons with disabilities. Even in the higher education also, section 32 is very much clear. In higher educational institutions also, you should give reservation, 5% reservation, 5 seats must be given for different disabilities. That is most important. Educational institutions even have to make some necessary changes even in your syllabus, even in your content, in order to accommodate their educational needs. So even adult education is also there. And one madam asked for employment opportunities and other things. For your information, there is a separate chapter on skill development and self-employment that is there from Article 9, Section 19 to 23. Like in that, clearly it highlights that every person with disability should be given an employment opportunity. They should be given vocational training and skill development. There should be sufficient opportunities made for that. You do see that there are various institutions established for the purpose. For example, National Institute for Visually Handicapped is there for blind persons. Likewise, there are various institutions and there are various employment training institutes. So they have to give skill development training, and technical training institutes are also there. They will give training for in skill development, etc. And visually challenged persons, physically challenged persons, speech and hearing impaired people, paraplegic people, orthopedically ones, and people with multiple disabilities. Depending upon their nature of disability, degree of disability, and skills acquired, they are able to discharge their due duties assigned to them in their own places, in the places, in institutions. So they are the rarest of rare human resources which can be harnessed by the society. So similarly, the section 20 clearly states that you should not discriminate or you should not deny any employment opportunity for any person on grounds of disability. It clearly indicates that employment makes an individual a respectable member of the society. It gives an important status in the status building. Employment is crucial. Without employment, perhaps person with disabilities will be neglected. Nobody will marry. Nobody will marry an unemployed person with disability. At least a normal person can marry without employment. If a person passes SSLC, he will get 1 lakh rupees dowry. If he passes PUC second year, he will get 2 lakh dowry. If he passes BA, at least he will get 10 lakh dowry. And if he passes MA, he will get at least 20 lakh to 30 lakh, like that. If he passes KS and ISS, his rate will be more in the market. Nobody laughed. I think you didn't understand.
Sir, one small clarification, sir.
Tell
Sir,
me.
Somsekhar, sir, Davanagere.
Sir.
Sir,
sir.
Davanagere Somsekhar, sir.
ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ ಸರ್.
ಸರ್, ಒಂದು ನಮ್ಮ ಕಾಲೇಜಲ್ಲಿ ಸರ್ ನಮ್ಮ ಕಾಲೇಜಲ್ಲಿ
Yes, sir.
DR Sambashekar CS left parent RCHR088 right parent S network mapped width is low. DR Sambashekar CS left parent RCHR088 right
making
parent
sound.
S network mapped width is low. DR Sambashekar CS left parent RCHR088 right parent S network mapped width is low. DR Sambashekar CS left parent RCHR088 right parent S network. Hold mute, currently unmuted. Hold plus A button.
Tell me, sir.
Press space bar.
Sir, tell me. Are you not hearing me?
Hello. Oh, yes, sir.
Sambashekar CS left parent RCHR088 right parent S network mapped width is low. Sambashekar CS left parent RCHR088 right
Your
parent
network is low, it seems.
width is low. DR Sambashekar CS left parent RCHR088 right parent S network mapped width is low. DR Sambashekar CS left parent RCHR.
Something else is said.
Krishnan sir, HRDC.
Hold mute, currently unmuted. Hold plus A button to activate. Press space bar.
Tell me, madam.
ಅವ್ರದ್ದೇನೋ ಇದು ನೆಟ್ವರ್ಕ್ ಏನೋ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಇದೆ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ ಸರ್.
ಹೌದು.
ಮಾತಾಡಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದೆ, ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅವರು.
Okay.
Sir,
He wanted to raise a question.
Sir, Somsekhar, Davanagere.
Tell me, sir.
CS left parent RCHR088 right parent S network mapped width is low. DR
Sir, you are.
CS left parent RCHR088 right parent S network mapped width is low.
Something else is sounding.
ಹಲೋ ಸರ್, ಕಂಟಿನ್ಯೂ ಮಾಡಿ.
Currently unmuted. Hold
Yes,
plus
sir.
A button to activate. Press space bar.
Okay. So these are the important things that, and similarly, every institution has a responsibility to declare its employment opportunity policy, equal opportunity policy. It should contain some important information like what posts are reserved, what are the designations, how many persons with disabilities are there, what posts they are occupying, what roster has been followed, and recruitment policy should also be declared, and promotion policy should also be declared. and what facilities have been given to the person with disabilities in an institution, in an employment place. All these have to be clearly mentioned as per section 21. And if any institution fails to do this, perhaps people have every right to question it. And naturally, state commissioners and commissioners, national chief commissioners and persons with disabilities at the central level, and state commissioners of persons with disabilities at the state level, and even deputy commissioner at the district level have every right to question such which fail to what you call display the employment policy, equal opportunity policy given to the persons with disabilities in their this thing. And section 22 clearly lays down that a record must be properly maintained, and the format is also given in that act. And secondly, there is also a provision for the appointment of the grievance redressal officer in order to address the issues and anxieties of the employees with disabilities in this thing. And whatever the complaints that are given to the grievance redressal officer, they have to be what you call addressed within 2 months. Under some circumstances, even within 1 month, they can be addressed. And a grievance registrar should also be maintained by that particular establishment. This is one part of the thing. And secondly, even in persons with special provisions for persons with benchmark disability also, there is a mention for what you call 4% reservation for persons with disabilities in employment, and identification of posts should also be made. While identification of the posts is made, both reserved and unreserved, both identified and non-identified posts, they should be, reservations should be clearly highlighted as to how many identified posts are reserved and how many non-identified posts are reserved, and what is the roster. All these things have to be clearly mentioned. And once in 3 years, posts have to be identified afresh, because in 2006, World Bank report on a special committee regarding the implementation of the act, it clearly mentioned both in union and state governments, they have completely failed in identifying the posts. At least once in 2 to 3 years, posts have to be reviewed and they have to be identified. Administrators are so versed and clever and cruel that sometimes they will identify and reserve the posts which are not managed by the persons with disabilities. For instance, I want to give you one institution. It reserved a chemistry lecturer post for a totally blind. Is it fair? Is it possible?
Not possible, sir. They
Not
have to see the lab
Yeah.
practicals they have to know.
Yes. So roster has to be properly maintained. Degree of disability should determine, it always determines the degree of opportunities. This is my proven hypothesis. The nature and degree of disability determines the nature and degree of opportunities available. So, I'm a blind person. I cannot be appointed as a driver in KSRTC or some other BMTC. If you appoint me to the driver post, there is every possibility of implementing a depopulation policy. So likewise, suitability of an individual has to be decided. Suitability of an individual has to be decided by taking into consideration the technological advances made. Because once upon a time, visually challenged persons were unable to make use of the technology because it was not so much developed. Computers were distant instruments for us. They were beyond our reach. Now visually challenged persons are making use of the computer technology, mobile technology, or in short, information and communication technology like anything. You find them in railways, railway workshops, in banks, in colleges, in universities, even in courts, etc., etc. Even in health sector, you do find. Even there are the panchayat development officers, and there are also FDAs and SDAs. So, and they are music teachers. No more. Only music is not a reliable profession for us. Including music, so many areas have attracted the attention of the challenge pursuers. So employment opportunities have to be given properly, and promotion has to be ensured, reservation has to be given, and the employment exchange offices are already there, and career, what you call, career guidance and counseling should also be given to them. All these things are most important things that have to, research and development has to be done in an to get the employment opportunities. All these things are most important, and for the implementation of these things, commissioners are already there, and special court can also be established in order to expedite the cases of the persons with disabilities. You should understand that severe punishments are also mentioned in the RPD Act for fraudulently getting the benefits meant for persons with disabilities. So
Hombal sir.
all these are the essential provisions of the RPD Act. If you have any question, I try to answer.